Today, we are diving into an absolutely massive explainer. We're going on a sprawling journey tracing human civilizations, ancient to modern. We are literally going to trace our steps from floating around as tiny atoms 3 billion years ago, all the way to taking that giant leap onto the moon. It's a story of survival, of raw ambition, and the wildly repeating patterns of human nature. So let's just get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with 1, the dawn of human civilization, move into 2, laws, philosophies, and rulers, tackle 3, the rise of global empires, navigate through 4, disease, discovery, and rebirth, and finish up with 5, revolutions to the moon.
Section 1, the dawn of human civilization. To really frame this entire journey, we have to ask ourselves a pretty profound question. How exactly did Homo sapiens rise to global dominance? How did we go from hunting and gathering in small groups to building sprawling, complex societies? Well, it was driven by this fundamental human quest for safety, power, and ultimately immortality. And it's actually incredible to think that this ancient drive is the exact same operating system running our modern human instincts today. Think about the sheer scale of this. Around 3 billion years ago, we were just tiny atoms in the world's petri dish. Fast forward a bit, 1.9 million years ago, Homo erectus leaves Africa. 400,000 years ago, we've got cold-adapted Neanderthals. But then, right around 4000 BCE, human ingenuity sparks something that changes the game entirely in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia: agriculture. Specifically, in the ancient Sumerian city of Uruk, humans figured out how to harvest and crush cereal grains using stone hand mills. Now, it's a wild trade-off when you really look at the data. We literally sacrificed our physical stature and our mobility for safety and scale. By creating a reliable food source, Uruk exploded into a city of 50,000 residents. But because of this back-breaking landlocked farming lifestyle, the average height of men drastically shrank. They went from 5'9" super athletic hunter-gatherers to 5'3" farmers. We quite literally changed our own biology to feed the masses. Of course, with massive populations came the invention of rigid social hierarchies. At the bottom of the Egyptian society, for example, you have peasants and slaves. They're doing all the grueling manual labor, literally building the Great Pyramids. Just above them, you've got artisans, merchants, scribes, soldiers, and bureaucrats. And at the absolute top, the pharaoh. The entire society was structured from the ground up to serve the pharaoh, who was viewed as the direct mediator to the gods. All of this intense labor was orchestrated simply to ensure the pharaoh's immortal ambition to rule the afterlife forever. Section 2, laws, philosophies, and rulers. So how do you keep tens of thousands of people in line? Early empires had to get creative. In Babylon, King Hammurabi carved 282 incredibly strict laws into stone. He literally codified a class system where a noble's bone was legally worth more than a slave's. Contrast that with China, where the Zhou dynasty relied on the mandate of heaven. They argued that power naturally follows merit, right up until the heavens decide to take it away through floods or famine. And to make the harsh, repetitive reality of everyday farming bearable, you had philosophies step in. Confucianism offered social duty, while Taoism focused on natural harmony, giving people a much-needed spiritual order. You know what they say, history rhymes. Just like we saw in Egypt, the Chinese Zhou dynasty organized remarkably similar feudal tiers. You have the peasants tied directly to the land at the very bottom, protected by soldiers, taxed heavily by the lords, with all of that ultimate wealth flowing straight up to the king at the top. The masses did the work, and the person at the absolute top reaped the rewards. Meanwhile, over in ancient Greece, we get this fascinating split test in human order. You have Sparta, which was brutally militaristic. Boys were literally taken from their families for harsh training, and their entire society, which was built entirely on the backs of enslaved helots, was designed purely to win wars. Period. Athens, on the other hand, went the opposite route.
They were a highly complicated, totally chaotic democracy. Get this, they used ancient sortition machines called claritarians to randomly select citizens for council duty. Plus, they had these massive, loud assemblies of over 30,000 citizens voting on huge state issues. Well, not everyone was a fan of that Athenian chaos. The great philosopher Plato actually thought randomly selecting leaders was totally absurd. He famously argued that there will be no end to humanity's troubles until philosophers become rulers. He believed a leader had to be a master navigator of wisdom and logic. But here's the grand irony of history. Almost every single conqueror that followed from east to west sincerely believed that they were that exact philosopher king. The pacing of history right around this time gives you absolute whiplash. In 550 BCE, Cyrus the Great is brilliantly conquering massive territories to build the Persian Empire. But around the exact same time, over in India, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama realizes the tragedy of human mortality, meditates under a fig tree, and becomes the Buddha, seeking profound inner peace. Then, by 336 BCE, Aristotle's own student, Alexander the Great, is violently conquering everything from Greece to India before dying at just 32. And shortly after that, the Indian conqueror Ashoka, utterly traumatized by the bloody slaughter of 100,000 people, suddenly converts to Buddhism and promotes nonviolence. It is a breathtaking pendulum swing of human nature.
Section 3. The Rise of Global Empires.
Now let's look at the brutal efficiency of Rome's unstoppable rise. Step 1. They definitively crush Carthage in the Punic Wars, locking down the Mediterranean. Step 2. Julius Caesar brilliantly and ruthlessly starves out the Gauls at the Siege of Alesia. Step 3. The Senate tries to strip Caesar of his power, so what does? He crosses the Rubicon River, sparks a massive civil war, wins it, and becomes dictator for life. Step 4, after Caesar is assassinated, his heir Octavian defeats Mark Antony, emerging as Augustus, the very first Roman emperor. Just like that, the Republic was gone and the emperor was everything.
But as we know, empires always fall. Western Rome eventually buckled under its own internal chaos and the relentless invasions of Germanic tribes like the Visigoths, and of course, the fearsome Huns led by Attila. But nature absolutely hates a vacuum. As the West fell, the East thrived through the Byzantine Empire, keeping Roman laws alive. Simultaneously, a massive new force stepped onto the world stage. Following the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad in the 7th century, the Islamic caliphates rapidly expanded their territory and religion all the way from Arabia to Spain. Section 4. Disease, Discovery, and Rebirth.
Look familiar? Yep. Humans went right back to the pyramid. With Western Europe plunged into the Dark Ages and absolutely terrified of brutal Viking raids, everyday people willingly gave up their freedom just to be safe. They became serfs at the bottom of the European feudal pyramid. Above them were knights, then kings and nobles, and finally, claiming direct authority from God, the Pope, sitting at the very top. Machiavelli really hit the nail on the head when he said, "It is much safer to be feared than loved." Try to put yourself in the shoes of that ordinary serf for a second. You spend generations farming, paying heavy taxes to a lord who basically does nothing but fight. So why don't you rebel? Because the intense fear of what the Huns or the Vikings would do to you without your ruthless protector was far greater than your desire for freedom. Fear is what preserved the system. The sheer density of historical trauma during this period is just staggering. In 1095, Pope Urban II launches the First Crusade, sparking brutal holy wars. By 1206, Genghis Khan unites the nomadic Mongols, using terrifying tactics to build the largest contiguous land empire in human history. We do get a brief spark of modern legal rights in 1215 when English barons forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. But then the 1340s hit. The bubonic plague, traveling right along the Silk Road, ravages the known world,
wiping out an unimaginable 75 to 200 million people.
And out of all that darkness comes a truly jarring dual reality. The year 1492 marks a massive turning point. Over in Europe, you have a cultural renaissance booming. Think Da Vinci painting the Mona Lisa, Michelangelo sculpting David. It's a rebirth of art and science. But simultaneously, European explorers like Columbus arrive in the Americas, bringing devastating biohazards like smallpox with them. Incredible civilizations like the Aztecs and Incas, who had built massive temples and floating gardens, were conquered by Spanish conquistadors and utterly decimated by foreign diseases.
Section 5. Revolutions to the Moon.
Entering the modern era, we see massive, violent ideological shifts. In 1776, American colonies forcefully break away from the British Crown to experiment with a constitutional democracy. France follows suit, overthrowing their king, but that spirals right into Robespierre's bloody reign of terror. Meanwhile, the Industrial Revolution is changing the world so fast that Karl Marx writes the Communist Manifesto, arguing that the working class needs to own the means of production. But as industrialization grew, so did the European appetite for raw resources, leading to the brutal scramble for Africa, violently drawing artificial borders for profit. All of these fiercely competing global ambitions eventually clashed, pulling the entire world into the mechanized slaughter of World War I and World War II.
To wrap up this incredible journey, let's actually jump all the way back to one of the earliest recorded kings, Gilgamesh of ancient Sumeria. He went on this frantic, epic quest for immortality, only to realize a profound truth. Life which you look for, you will never find. For when gods created man, they let death be his share. Despite our computers, our medicine, and our incredible technological leaps, human nature and our ultimate mortality remain exactly the same as they were in the ancient Fertile Crescent. Empires rise and empires fall. In 1969, humanity landed on the moon. Today, our world is vastly more connected through technology than ever before. Yet the story remains an incomplete book. The masses will always clamor for safety, and the cycle of power will always churn. So, as we step to the moon and beyond, what legacy will our modern civilization leave behind when the cycle inevitably repeats? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. Keep questioning everything, and I'll see you next time.